Well, hello there, and welcome to Chapter 15, which is discussing human resources and some of the ethics and social responsibilities that go into this really important department in running businesses and corporate America, well, and even in the public sector, such as schools and the government. So, our objectives today are one, I'm going to be going over the importance of human resources and why it's important to business success. I'll discuss some of the key human resource issues in today's economy while outlining some challenges and opportunities that the human resources function faces. I'll discuss some human resource planning in terms of recruitment and annual reviews, and then I'll go over some key federal legislation points that do affect human resources. So, why do businesses need it? Um, Businesses need a strong human resources management department because it's this group of people that focuses their energy on recruiting the best talent. They look at how to develop a career plan and, you know, how all those various pieces fit together. They also think about how to boost your workforce strategy for effectiveness, and that can be either sizing up or expanding the employees if you are experiencing growth, such as Amazon. Or it can be the opposite, where maybe you're a manufacturing firm and the tools of the trade make it so you don't need quite as many employees, so downsizing. So human resources manage both. But one of the key points of a human resource management team is that when you think of employees, you're investing in people, and you want your people to be able to um, benefit the company as much as possible in an ethical way, not in a bad way, but you want to hire productive employees. So, what are some challenges that face the human resources department? Well, you've got layoffs and outsourcing. So, we oftentimes hear in the news about major companies downsizing. Nike recently had an announcement that they were laying off 3,000 workers. And it's, certainly affected those of us here in Portland. Having a wage gap. So, wage gap can be between genders. It can be, um, how much it costs to live versus what the company can afford to pay. So those are some dynamic tensions that are there. Having older workers. Older workers are an incredible resource in terms of talent. And you can also, on the flip side, you can run into older workers that aren't so motivated. They're just sort of skating it out. Younger workers. A new challenge for human resources is young workers have kind of a new, interesting dynamic where they think they don't have to show up, and lo and behold, when they don't show up for a couple of weeks and they no longer have a job, they're actually surprised that they don't have a job. And that's true, that's happening. How are, females treated in the workplace? How are, work-life balance? You want to, get what you can from an employee so that they're productive during your working hours. But work shouldn't be all consuming either, because that creates incredible burnout. So You want employees to have that work-life balance. And then it's super important to be aware of lawsuits and what are the legal requirements that you need to follow in terms of um, when you can reprimand an employee. What is legal reprimanding? Or if you decide not to hire someone, and lawsuits have been brought forth because of that. You didn't hire me. I'm going to sue you. And companies have to be very careful to make sure that they are following both federal and state laws in regards to hiring. Now, human resources is typically sort of thought of as the corporate black sheep in the company. And this definitely provides some challenges for human resource managers because they're viewed as having insufficient strategic skills, and they're also viewed sometimes as, these are the people that are in charge of downsizing, and they're really not viewed as in a positive light sometimes. And there are times where, if a company is struggling, that they'll say, okay, we're going to cut the human resources department. And so there's always this dynamic tension between the groups. So some solutions to, helping to keep human resources viewed in a really positive light is to know the company and to understand the role that human resources plays in the company, and to be also thinking about, well, what are some of the exceptions here? How can we make ourselves relevant? How can we be a department that is fostering production, that is fostering a career path for employees so that they want to stay with the company? So these are some of the ways to combat some of that negative image that HR can have. So when you think about human resource planning, part of what they do is they look at jobs, and when they're looking at a specific position, they're thinking about what is it exactly that the person in this role, what do they do and contribute? How will they contribute to the company? So if it's a salesperson, you need to have someone who's willing to go out and build relationships and talk with people. They need to be able to manage a budget. They need to understand their products. They need some technical skills in terms of being able to understand sales data, market data, how to put together presentations. All these little details the HR department has to think about. And they do this by, creating a job description. So if you look on Monster or some other online, even Craigslist has jobs available, you can see what some of the requirements for the positions are. And then some jobs have special qualifications that you need to have for that particular position. A teacher, for example, has to hold a teaching license in the state of Oregon. If you're a welder, you need to be certified through a particular program, or an electrician also has a certification program. Some jobs you have to be able to lift a certain amount of weight. I've seen 25 pounds, sometimes it's 50 pounds. It all depends on the type of job. Are you standing? Are you sitting? So these are some of the job specs that go into writing a job description. Now, the strategic planning aspect of human resource management, and if you look here at It's really very circular. So I think of it as starting with recruitment in the blue, and then it moves into selecting your employees, training your employees, evaluating the employees, um, thinking about the compensation package, and that involves more than just money. It's health benefits. Maybe it's time off or flex time. And then finally, separation. What does that look like? Is it separation can be from downsizing. It can be maybe someone found a different job, or maybe they're heading into retirement. So separation occurs for all sorts of reasons, and having a plan for that, and then the cycle begins again. So let's go into some of this in greater detail. So recruitment, when HR begins to seek out new employees, there's a couple of different ways that happens. So one is internally, and this can oftentimes be a source of great pride for companies. They're saying, oh, we promote from within. And that creates an environment where employees are really emotionally connected to the company, and because they know that there's valued, or they are valued. It can boost morale. It reduces the risk for the firm. You know who you're promoting. They aren't an unknown. And it also reduces the cost of recruiting and training. That is highly, highly expensive when you're going outside of your firm. So those are some definite benefits to recruiting from inside. Now, external recruitment, this is where a company is hiring from outside. You run an ad, or maybe you use a recruiter. And you can use, websites, newspaper ads. You can recruit through trade associations such as the Grocers Marketing Association of America is an example. You can recruit at colleges and universities at their employment centers, and there's employment agencies, and probably one of the best ways that external recruitment works is through referrals, a friend of a friend. And very seldom, there's a saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. Oftentimes when people, people are looking for a job, it's those personal connections, and those can be great resources. Now, the selection process, this can be really tricky. So you have to be able to, as you're going through your interviewing process, what are the tools that you're going to be using to accept a candidate or reject an unqualified candidate? And it's, applications and resumes are part of that process, where you've developed the application and you're asking the candidate specific information to ferret out the types of skills that they can be bringing to the position. And it helps you to narrow down the candidate list. After the application, then you typically have interviews. So to keep everything consistent, it's very important to have a standardized list of questions that you ask all of your candidates. And that way you're giving everyone an equal opportunity to answer and respond to what you're asking them. Sometimes there's testing. So testing, depending on the job, can be a typing test. For example, 911 dispatchers, they have to be able to type 40 words per minute. So if a candidate can't reach that threshold, then they probably wouldn't have an interview. You can also have testing afterwards, and some of these tests can be, personality you think you saw, felt like there was a connection between the person and the culture of the firm, but you want to verify that through some personality and psychological tests. Drug testing. This is super common because employers do not want to hire people that have a drug problem. That's a huge issue. So frequently they have drug testing and then physical exams, depending on the scope of the position. If you're going to be doing a lot of lifting, you want to make sure you're hiring somebody that doesn't have a back problem. And so all of these are considerations, and they do change based on the type of job that the employee will be doing or performing. References and background checks. This is very important. So what references do is they can help to identify any lies or deception that an employee may have filled out on their application. So some typical areas that potential employees sort of stretch. The truth is, education. We sometimes hear in the news about people that there was a doctor not too long ago that he's been practicing medicine. The man never went to medical school. He's a complete fraud. So when you put educational background on an application, you want to check it out and make sure that your candidate is being truthful and has integrity. Job titles. You want to look for accuracy in job titles, compensation. And really the purpose of this is trying to make sure that you are bringing on board an ethical employee. You don't want someone to be hired that you can't trust, because you need them to perform their job. So that's the purpose of this. Now, when making a job offer, and again, this is from the standpoint of the company, so you want to be able to make an offer that is lucrative and creative. So it needs to be of financial value for the employee to say, yeah, I'm willing to do this job for that amount of money. And it's really cool when you can have a job that also throws in other features, flex time, being able to work from home. Maybe there's a sabbatical system. Intel, when you've worked for them for, I think, 10 years, you're able to take a sabbatical. They want you to rejuvenate. So there are all sorts of different features that can be included in the job offer. Typically, there's what's called a probationary period, and this is a set period of time where it's kind of like you're on trial. So the company is checking you out, seeing, okay, do we want to hire you or not? And usually it's a 90-day period, because that gives the new employee a chance to really understand the company, and they can begin to be productive in that time frame. And if they can prove that they are worthy, then the job moves into a permanent position. And then sometimes we can also offer a job to someone. They can be called contingent workers. Sometimes they're called consultants or temporary workers. These are employees who do not expect a regular or full-time job. So an example of this might be a seasonal worker at Fred Meyer, where they, during the holidays, the retailers, they're hiring more people because there's more people shopping. Well, they're going to bring on employees for a short amount of time. And for some people, that's great. They just want that extra little bonus time, and then they can go back to what their normal life looks like. So human resources also needs to take steps to offer a training and development program so that when you do hire employees, you want them to be successful and you want them to have clear expectations about their position. So the first step is usually developing a training program, and this helps to get the employee synchronized to the culture of the firm, and it also gives you a chance to provide really important information, typically about benefits and work hour expectations, important company policies that need to be followed. So that happens initially, and then as employees are around for a long time, then you start thinking about developing them for further responsibilities. So some positions require on-the-job training, and this is where your responsibilities are learned. They're learned live. So a cashier sometimes is an example of a job where you're learning live, or making a sales presentation. You're going to go in for the first time, and there you go. It's live, it's active, and you're building those skills, building that relationship, and some of that just can't happen in a stale environment. So in terms of training, there's also apprenticeships. So a lot of the trades use this. There's electrical apprenticeships. There are welding apprenticeships, plumbing apprenticeships. Also, college kids frequently have what's called internships. And this is a way for somebody who doesn't have a lot of skills, but maybe has some training, where you are exposed to a company and you get additional training. And this is a fantastic tool for companies because it gives you a chance to test an employee out without the obligation of formally hiring them. And it's short term. It gives the potential employee an opportunity to get some credentials, and the company can say, yeah, when they're done with their program, I want to hire them. Frito-Lay has a plant over in Vancouver, and they frequently have summer internships, and they recruit out of the University of Portland. And I'm thinking of a young lady specifically who did a fantastic internship with them, and they've now offered her an amazing job because they really liked her work. So these are great ways to help train and develop employees. Off the job training, so taking time where you remove the employee from their daily responsibilities and you send them to a seminar or a special course that is off-site. And these can be fantastic resources as a way of developing your employees and giving them skills to either enhance their current position or to prepare them for additional responsibility. And management programs. So some of your larger companies, I know Amazon does this, Nike, a lot of the food manufacturing companies such as PepsiCo, they have companies and programs that if they see management potential, and this is, the human resource department that helps to identify these employees, and they say, oh, this person is a rising star. We want to put them on the fast track for additional responsibilities, and they will send you to special programs. Sometimes they'll pay for master's programs. And it's, again, it's a way for the company to invest in you because you're valued and they want you to stay. And human resources is the department that really pays attention to that. Now, evaluation. So all positions, regardless of whether you're at the entry level position within a firm or the upper echelon and you're the CEO, all positions are evaluated, and the Human Resource Department is involved in writing this. So the formal appraisals are ways for companies to tell you, hey, these are some strengths that you have, and keep doing these things. And then they also give an opportunity to say, hey, we need you to do better in this area and we're going to send you for training. It's a good time for that fantastic feedback, and it makes sure that what is happening is aligned with what you expect to happen. If there's a gap, that's where there's a problem. And the Human Resources Department develops these evaluation systems so that they are consistent throughout the firm. You don't want one employee receiving very easy criteria and then another employee is being evaluated on something different. The HR department really oversees having that consistency. So sometimes, and I know I have certainly seen this play out in my career, sometimes there are appraisal goof ups. We're all human. And a strong human resources company will help to evaluate and make sure that these don't happen. For example, you really don't want to use an appraisal as an opportunity to catch an employee doing something wrong. So that's not the purpose, and it creates a lot of tension between management and employees if that's the type of environment. It should be a very fact-based process. It shouldn't be used as an excuse to give feedback once every year. They're written up once a year, but feedback should be ongoing so that there are no surprises. Employees know if they're on track or not on track. You don't want to use it as a substitute for you've got a feeling that somebody's not working out, but you don't have any documentation. So you don't want to use it as a means to support that gut reaction that you might have sometimes. And you don't want to give too much importance to recent accomplishments. So those are all, if somebody's just made the biggest sale of their career and within a month they have, their annual review, you don't want the whole review to be based on that one success. That's a piece of the puzzle that needs to be considered, but don't make the appraisal based on one activity or event. And then it's really important that you filter all comments through your personal biases. So again, this is about being objective and being fair and trying to keep personality out of it as much as you can. And that's the human resources. That's the goal, is to make it fair and objective. So these are things that certainly go into human resource goofs. You want to be objective. So after you've hired someone and you've appraised them, the compensation package. So these are, as I said before, it's a combination of pay and benefits that employees receive in exchange for their work. And strong, healthy companies are always considering, am I offering a fair wage? Am I losing employees because I'm not paying enough anymore? So that needs to be considered. People want to be fairly compensated. And people also want to feel like they're contributing. So how will the employee contribute to the health of the company? The company needs to be able to pay. That's super important. Sometimes you hear about entrepreneurs that start a company and they don't have the resources, the financial resources, and they end up going bankrupt and their employees aren't paid. So you want to make sure that your company has the ability to pay. You have to consider cost of living. So when someone is hired in 2017, you want to be adjusting their salary every year a reasonable amount, because in 2022 that salary is not going to go as far. So you need to be making adjustments. And then finally, legislation. So there are rules and guidelines for different types of positions. So it's really important that the compensation, be reflective of these changes, and that they're folded into the benefits package as these changes occur. So I think I've talked a little bit that the wage needs to be fair, a fair exchange, and really the distinction here is wage tends to be thought of more as rate per hour. So are you earning minimum wage? Or you also have usually your management teams, and this is a salary that employees receive over a fixed period of time. And I would say it's typically figured out more monthly as opposed to weekly. It might be paid weekly, but a lot of sales positions, management positions, you might begin with a salary of $60,000 a year, and then that would be divided by 12. So your monthly salary would be $5,000. And so that is a difference between the terms wages and salaries. Now, some firms offer different types of performance pay options, and depending on the type of firm that the human resource department is in, that will determine what that looks like. So you have commission, and commission is where if you make a sale or a certain profit target, then you're paid a percentage of that. Real estate agents make a commission. So their commission is 5 to 6% of the sales price of the home or commercial property. Bonuses are lump sum payments for hitting a target. It can be a sales target, it can be a profit target. And usually it's based on a combination of both individual and team. So companies are very driven by that because people like money. Profit sharing. So you see profit sharing a lot in high-tech firms, especially, where they want employees to be invested in the firm, and if you are motivated to help that company be profitable, then the company is going to share a part of those profits directly with you. And that can be a fantastic pay option. Stock options, where the company issues you stock based on company performance, or maybe part of a 401k contribution. If you put in 3%, the company will match. And then pay for knowledge. So if you are increasing your value and your skills towards the company, sometimes companies will pay you for that. And it's a fantastic way for companies to retain employees. So human resources, again, are very involved in developing these types of options. Benefits. Now, these are non-cash compensation, and they include things such as health insurance, vacation, childcare. Those are all really big issues in the world of human resources. And, the human resource department makes sure that some of these other programs, such as Social Security and Medicare contributions, everybody by law is mandated to pay a certain amount of Social Security tax and Medicare tax. So the Human Resources Department will look at that, and these are benefits that you don't receive now, but you will receive in the future. Companies also make payments to state unemployment and workers' compensation programs in case you're hurt on the job. And then there's job protection for the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. So this act allows employees to take up to 3 months off, not necessarily paid, but you can take up to 3 months off from your job to help a family member that needs care. Maybe it's an elderly parent, or maybe you've had a baby, or maybe your significant other has had a baby and you want to take time to care for that new infant. This act is a benefit that allows employees to take that time without fear of losing their job. So that's an example of some benefits. Other benefits or benefit structures are that companies can set up kind of I like the description of cafeteria or smorgasbord, where you're given a certain amount of money, and employees can then pick and choose how they want to spend that money so that it makes sense for their lifestyle and their needs. So a younger person, so I've seen this done with healthcare. So maybe an employee is given $1,000 a month to spend on their healthcare in any fashion that they decide, and they can choose. A young person might choose a high deductible plan because it's cheap and they don't have to worry about going to the doctor quite as much as maybe somebody who's in their 30s or 40s that has a family. So you're thinking about family benefits. You might choose a different medical program because your life is different than it was in your mid-20s, and so on and so forth. Flex time. This allows workers to decide when they're working, and you still have to put in your time, but some people are morning people. They're up at 6. They want to be done at 3. Other people, they're night owls. So maybe they start at 3 in the afternoon and they work until midnight. So some companies allow flex time as one of their benefits. Telecommuting. This is where you're working from home and you're accessible by phone, sometimes fax, but you're definitely available by internet. And, attending school at MIWA is kind of an example of telecommuting. And can be really beneficial for both the company and employees because, from an employee standpoint, you're not having to commute, and so you're saving time that way. And for the company, by having your employees uh, working from home, you don't have to spend as much money on office space, and there's other infrastructure considerations that you don't need to worry about. So that can be a huge selling point or benefit for a potential employee. And then job sharing. So some jobs lend itself where maybe you've got two people that want to work, but they only want to work part-time. So that's where the two of you can split that job in half, and it takes a lot of coordination. But for some companies, they're able to offer that. And again, these are um, all benefits that a human resource department will take a look at and evaluate based on their competition, based on trends in the workplace. These are all things to be considered. So I wanted to delve into telecommuting just a tiny bit because we hear more and more about that. And, it doesn't take a rocket scientist here in Oregon, especially in the Portland metropolitan area. Traffic is now a nightmare. So I would say we have Los Angeles level traffic here in Portland. So a benefit of telecommuting is that, it frees up office space. You can have higher employee productivity because um, people, when you're not exposed to as many people, you're not getting sick as often. And a lot of times people are much more productive working from home because you don't have all those what we call water cooler conversations. And it also gives the company access to a bigger pool of talent because you don't need everyone to live right in the town where you are or to have to travel in. You can be spread that employee web a little wider so that you can get um, more talent. A drawback from the organization is that it's very difficult to maintain your company culture when your employees are not together in the same space. So while you can have virtual meetings and webinars, there is a different level of connection that happens when you are in person. And it can also provide some challenges for monitoring and managing employees. If they aren't there on site, you might suspect that they're not being as productive as they should be, but it's more difficult to build that case. So it can be structurally a little challenging. As an employee, it's super cool to have the ability to be flexible, and you're saving time on commuting. It helps when you're not commuting to balance your work and family. And you can even work in your pajamas and, nobody knows. And that can be kind of fun. Um, a drawback from an employee standpoint is it's harder to have a fast track, and especially because you have to really network those relationships very differently than if you were on site. And part of that lack of fast track career potential is that you don't have as much influence in the organization, being as isolated as you are. And that isolation, you can also miss out on that social cultural structure that is happening in the office because those people are working together. They've built that stronger relationship, and Anyway, so those can be some drawbacks from an employee standpoint. Now, leaving employment, this does happen. So reasons, people can be promoted and they're maybe moving into an entirely different department, or maybe they've been recruited by another company. They can be fired, or transfers, or maybe just laid off. There's not a need for those positions anymore, and those can be really difficult times within a company, and especially as for the HR team, because you want to be able to manage that process very smoothly. So some things to be aware of, especially when you are going through when you're terminating an employee, or even going through a downsizing, corporate downsizing. So one of the many legal acts is called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And basically, this prohibits discrimination from happening based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So if a company is, an example might be, let's say your workforce is half Caucasian and half African American. Well, if the company is going through downsizing and the only group that is laid off is the African American group, that's against the law. You cannot do that. It has to be, because that's based on color of skin. And so when downsizing is occurring, it's very important that the rationale be very clear, it be very objective, and that it's free from bias. So if you're downsizing, maybe it's an entire department and everybody leaves. And so anyway, it's super important to do that. And age can also be, if you are over the age of 40, so you need to, that over the age of 40 is also a protected class. So you have to be conscientious of that. Are you only targeting your older workers to avoid paying retirement benefits? And companies have tried that and it's illegal. So you always have to be aware of the legal implications of the changes that you're making. So we have some of these different acts. You have your Fair Labor Standards Act, so making sure that everybody is, they're working 40 hours a week, and if they work more than that, then they're compensated for that. Children are no longer allowed to work. You can't be 6 years old working on the production line. The Equal Pay Act, so you cannot discriminate and pay people differently based on all of those considerations, your race, your national origin, your gender. So this is kind of a hot issue right now, particularly as it relates to gender. And progress is being made, but it's still a work in process. Occupational Safety and Health Act. People need to be able to work in a safe environment. And if you're working in a toxic environment, that needs to be disclosed to you, so that you are making, if you're deciding to work for a company, you do that with full knowledge. The Immigration Reform Act. So this is about documenting that you are hiring people that are here in the United States legally. That's the key point there. And And companies get into a lot of trouble if they're hiring people that have immigrated to the United States illegally. So you want to make sure that who you're hiring has all of their paperwork in order. Americans with Disabilities Act. So this was only came into place in 1990, where people that have differences, maybe they're an amputee or they're in a wheelchair, historically, folks that have those differences have had a more difficult time getting a job, even though their skills may have been equal to. And so the Disabilities Act makes it so that when an applicant is applying, you are considering their skills and not their physical differences, unless it would be an impairment for the job. And then the Family Medical Leave Act, I talked about that as far as being able to take 3 months off to contend with a family issue, birth, death, care of an elderly parent, and you don't have to worry about losing your job. You may not be paid, but you don't have to worry about losing your job. So HR oversees all of these different laws to make sure that the companies are in compliance. Now, affirmative action. So this is a movement that is meant to increase employment and educational opportunities for minority groups. And what it does is it attempts to make up for past discrimination by creating opportunities for underrepresented groups, typically, African Americans, Hispanics. It's a way of trying to level out opportunities for everybody. So HR needs to be aware of these policies and making sure that the workforce is representative of the communities that we live in. Sexual harassment, that's in the news a lot lately. So sexual harassment is illegal. You may not discriminate against a person because of his or her gender. You may not ask for sexual favors. You may not tell sexual jokes. These all create what's called a hostile environment, and it's illegal. And the HR department, when allegations are made, it's the HR department that becomes involved in investigating those types of things. If there is a problem, an employee brings a complaint and HR, investigates and finds, oh yeah, that person did do that, and then they don't do anything, not only is the company liable, but there can also be some personal liability on the HR manager. So it's super important to not only prevent this type of behavior from happening, but if it does, then to have a process in place to correct it. Okay, so looking back. So we talked about the importance of human resources and why this is a super critical department in companies, and it's very, very important. We looked at some of the human resource issues in today's economy while outlining challenges and opportunities that the human resources function faces. And finally, we talked about the importance, and I would say this is probably the most important role of human resources, is planning for and maintaining the core human resource responsibilities in terms of hiring and recruiting employees. That's what I meant to say. And then we took a very brief look at some of the key federal laws that do affect human resources. And these are important regulations to know as a human resources manager and really as an employee as well. And so there we go. Nice job. Okay, so next steps. So there's a quiz, and it's an essay quiz. So I'd like you to do that. And then as our course is getting closer to wrapping up, and it's hard to believe the quarter's almost over, I want you to start thinking about your final paper. And this is only a one-page paper. It's not very long, but I want you to think about quite seriously and to answer this writing prompt. If I were to major in business, my primary interest would be blank because of this reason. So if I were to answer this, I would say if I were to major in business, my primary interest of marketing, my primary area of interest would be marketing because I enjoy creating the process of creating a product and developing programs that entice people to purchase my product. And then I would go into more detail about that. I would like you to research this, research your area, and have at least 2 references that demonstrate the use of some of the material that we've covered. And I do not want you to use the textbook for this course as one of your references. I want you to go outside of the textbook. There's so much information out there. And then definitely include a reference page. So this needs to be its own little page, but use MLA format. And the paper itself should be 1 full page, 12-point font with 1-inch margins, single spaced, not double, single spaced. Alrighty? So thank you so much, you guys. Have a fantastic day. And if you have any questions about this paper, let me know. Take care. Bye-bye.